Dear friends, I'm glad to see you at Feygin Live again. It is 10 minutes past 2 minutes past 10 on Thursday, 19th of May, day 85 with Olexiy Arestovych. We're talking about war and peace. Glad to see you, Olexiy. Likewise, glad to see you all. We have about 160,000 people watching us now live. And excuse me bugging you to death, but it is important to subscribe and also leave your like to help promote via the YouTube algorithms and share it in your social media so more people get wind of that podcast. If you're watching that in English, subscribe to the Privateer station. We're trying to catch up with the broadcasts these two guys are doing daily. All right, let's discuss the actual matters. What's happening on the east? Do we understand it correct that Severodonetsk is under heavy attack? Administration of that city announced today that 12 citizens have perished because of Russian bombardment and about the same amount of wounded, and this number may change because they're still fighting for the lives of those who are wounded. That means that the enemy is really close to the city. They've been targeting it for a while, but now it's really close. And it's the Russian style of war, when they use field artillery on the city itself. One doesn't want to comment it. So they're knowingly hit the city, understanding that they're hitting civilians. Yes, they do understand that they hit civilians. Is it a way to scare everybody away, or why are they doing it? It is their style of war. They're doing it every time they come to the city. So, in my experience, Russian logic looks like this. Let's hit that military target. What if we hit civilians nearby? Who cares? Ukrainian side does different. If there is a very fat target, but there is a risk of killing civilians, we let the target slip. Russians do it differently, differently, and sometimes they even choose to hit the peaceful target. And looking at today's bombardment, it is kind of hard to tell what are they hitting exactly, because it's a mix of everything. Is there any equipment there in that area that is changing the situation? No, there's nothing drastically different. They picked 8 to 10 battle groups in, I believe, Rostov region. They're relatively fresh and relatively new. So they're taking Bakhmut route to the west and in the north, Popasna. So there are no significant changes on the front today. You know, sometimes nothing happens for 3 or 4 days. Basically, both sides are gathering their powers and accumulating force. And then bam, bam, bam. And it's even hard to comment because so many changes in one day. So this day is not that one day. And they've been just pushing the usual. Let's take a look at the map. Nothing unusual, similar to what we've seen before. This is actually, I think, later yesterday's map from the 18th of May. There with blue, you can see the areas near Kharkov that have been deoccupied and areas that Ukraine army had advanced. So we're really curious about the back of the Izium direction, where Ukrainian army can advance towards Kupiansk. So what's the intensity of that army progressing to the right versus the intensity of push happening near Izium? I have to be very politically correct here because I don't want to spill any. So let me find the right words. There is movement And one should know that Kupiansk is one of the major railroad hubs, transport hubs for the Russian army. It's an intersection of automobile and railroad ways, and from the beginning of this offensive, Russia aimed to capture Kupiansk, and they've done it early on in the campaign. So any movement of Ukrainian force to that location puts the whole Izium line of offensive of Russian Federation on a very thin thread. So I think I kind of used all the possible ifs and buts, but the success of this movement could really affect the progress of Russian troops. A few days ago, there was actually an outstanding military success in that area. What was that? A Russian army forced a water barrier that I thought we would have issues crossing, because I thought we'll be in a mirror situation like Severodonetsk, where near Belogorovka, where we destroyed a ton of Russian equipment when they were forcing. So somehow our troops managed to cross that river speedily. It really did not slow them down. They basically came and went right through. So that alerted Russian troops, and they started to relocate some of their troops to block that movement. But so far they have not been successful, because that blue area keeps progressing to the right. This is a dangerous move. If it will continue the current motion, Russian troops near Izium will find themselves in a very sad situation. The interesting fact that we noticed is that when we noticed this move, when we actually started pushing noticeably on in that area, we had observed interesting things on the Russian side. At first, they did not believe. Second, they did not want to report. Third, they did not want to report in full truth. And the fourth, when they finally reported, we have already crossed that river that was a significant barrier in that area. So here we're trying not to harm what's happening, so let us talk more about that whenever we achieve certain operational success. In the meantime, I think I've said everything I could say about it. All right, tell us a little more about Severodonetsk. Is the situation unfolding in a dangerous scenario for Severodonetsk, or did the Russian propaganda exaggerate that? Because right now they're discussing that they'll surround Severodonetsk soon, and it will fall and surrender. Let's put it this way. Theoretically, the danger of surrender exists. During the last 24 hours, they pushed their territory, the occupied territory, further. But there is a significant but there. Not in a way that it would make it dangerous, and not with the amount of troops that it would make considerably dangerous for Severodonetsk. And again, capture of the city, we just went through the story of Mariupol. It is a nightmare for an army. But Severodonetsk, it's a much smaller town, it's not Mariupol. True, it is not Mariupol, but it is not too small either. There is a very similar story there. There is a big factory in it. And I'm not going to continue details about it, but that scenario is quite possible in that city as well. And that would be a very sad perspective for Russian troops. And if proper battle actions will be happening in that city, they will feel the pain. Those troops that actually got Popasna the other week, commission. Each of them has not more than 20% of their personnel left after that capture. So, the general line of that story, this front, the side of the front hurts both. We feel the pain and we're tired, and Russians definitely feel the pain. That is why they're so hopeful for the pincer movement, and they want to encircle the city to psychologically force our troops to push out and evacuate. Not too sad of an idea, or not too stupid an idea, but it takes skill, and I don't know if they can pull it through. It is a difficult game there, and it is dangerous for both sides. It is not the beginning of conflict. It's not the times when Ukrainian battalion had 2 brigades against it, and battalion had to be really brave and creative to hold them. Right now, the attackers and defenders are in a very dangerous ratio. It is dangerous for both sides. For them, because we are much bigger than before, and we have a lot of infantry that knows how to defend and that knows how to use anti-armor equipment. At the same time, their ratio of artillery and air force is exceeding our capabilities. So it sort of reminds if you're a hunter, imagine a big stag in the forest, and there is a pack of wolves surrounding it, and they want to jump and put it down, but they're scared too, because the first one to approach for sure will be kicked and horned and likely will die. So they're scared and they're just walking around. I'm almost physically feeling if Russian command wants to proceed through the city and go into the street fighting mode, or do they want to surround it and hope for military to withdraw? So it is a difficult choice for them. Within a day or two, we'll see what decision have they made just by the major direction of their offensive in that area. So for now, they're probably bent over the maps trying to pick their next step. And depending upon how they proceed, this operation may either have success for them or may finally break apart completely. Okay, let's talk about another thing. We're not discussing Mariupol today still, right? We're waiting? Yes, we are waiting. Okay. There is almost 400,000 people watching us. Those who came later, please do not forget to share the links in your social media and different groups. Subscribe to Feygin Live, to Arestovych's channel, and to the Privateer station if you like watching that in English. It is the day of a national shirt. Olexiy is wearing one for both of us. He is dressed properly for the occasion. So we heard that the head of American command called Gerasimov in Russia. Very little data about that.
Про Герасимова, во всяком случае, наши источники подтверждают, что он действительно в опале. Ему решили как бы поручить декорации. То есть он решение не принимает. Во всяком случае, по поводу этой операции точно нет.
From what we know, Russian general is not in charge of that operation near Severodonetsk.
Рассказывает сказки, все возможно. Но, тем не менее, все-таки они решили его показать, что он, за что-то...
But at least it appears that Russian command still holding Gerasimov in action. They have not fired him completely or put him under investigation. So, I guess that's one of the only things we can read from that notion. What do you think? After this pause from the February 14th, I think, at the end of February, Russian military stopped picking up phones. So now they have talked. They actually picked up the phone. So, what does it matter in your? What does it mean in your mind? Do you think they're discussing nuclear things? I think no. I think one of the reasons the call would have been made is probably since American side received information about possible permanent annexation of Kherson area.
Судя по активности товарища Хабибых из, как его там, вице-премьера.
Да. Хуснулина.
I suspect that they're taking that story of possible annexation of southern territories. They're taking it seriously. So how would American militaries affect Russia? They can promise, what, give airplanes to Ukraine? No, conditionally. They could have said, we thought about giving 200,000 tanks to Ukraine, and now, since you're behaving that bad, we'll give you 700,000 tanks. You mean hundreds of thousands of tanks? No, I'm just, using special figures so one could not quote me and say Arestovych said America is giving that many tanks. No, I'm using fake data for that, just to give you an example.
К примеру, оно вот так вот. Мы не думали передавать вот такие системы вооружения, а вот если вы объявите, передадим.
We did not want to give that kind of weapon, and then we decided that we will proceed because of your behavior. So there are different ways to push through, and I think Americans considered that some threat as real threat and decided to warn Russia about the consequences. Do you think Russia will react to that? Of course, they have to. Because it's the head of Joint Chiefs of American military. He's equal to Russian head of general command. Well, technically, but he's got about 500 times more power because he represents all of different kinds of troops America has. So it is a serious story, and Russia needs to pay attention to that. But Russians did ignore Americans at the beginning of war. What changed now? Well, guess what changed? That back then they were under illusion that they're kings of the hill and they can take Ukraine in 3 or 4 days. Now they're getting slowly married to reality, so they started picking up phone. And now they're backpedaling about the nukes as well. Yeah, right. Zaharova mentioned, the deputy for the Foreign International team, mentioned yesterday, we have never threatened with nukes. And Russian negotiation team again raised their voice today, saying they're ready to negotiate more. And Michael Podolyak, our side, mentioned that we're ready to negotiate with you whenever you bring actual negotiable aspect to the table.
Почему-то мне так кажется. Это мое предположение.
Ну, а Михаил Подоляк что-нибудь рассказывает? Может, он больше знает?
Миша, конечно, рассказывает, но...
So doesn't Michael tell you more than becomes known from the open sources? Well, he does share some things, but, I can only comment his official statements, so... No comments on the negotiation. Besides what we just said, 425,000 watching us live. We are at almost 20 minutes. So, about propaganda, after several days since that expert Khodorkovsky pushed that idea that Russia may be losing in this war on their propaganda show, do you think anything changed, any rhetoric changed, or do you not have time to track them? I don't track everything, but we can definitely see that in general the rhetoric becomes softer, and they're also allowing people like Khodorkovsky to even speak without being interrupted or yelled at. So their position is going back to not everything is so simple. Pentagon mentioned today that Senate did vote for 40 billion of support for Ukraine. So they're sending more howitzers, more tactical armored vehicles, supplies. Basically, in simple language, they're giving us a howitzer division, which cannot make us not happy. This is a very serious argument on the battlefield. And I understand there is a lot being expected from artillery in the current warscape. So right now there are no barriers for American manufacturing companies to produce for Ukraine. That's correct. Lend-Lease is about that.
То есть Ленд-Лиз, голосование за Ленд-Лиз и за эту помощь. Ну, Ленд-Лиз был подписан, президент подписал, а голосование за военную помощь выделяет уже средства.
So President signed Lend-Lease, and the voting was about actually giving money for that Lend-Lease program. And today, Kiriyenko on the Russian side, together with Kazakh, pushed a statement that Russia is not fighting with Ukraine. Against us, we have the whole West fighting against Russia using the hands of Ukraine, sadly. So here they're basically pushing an idea that, yeah, we can lose, but losing to the whole Western world is not so bad as losing to Ukraine. They're also winking towards the possible referendum in the DNR and LNR, and they're saying that Russian region over cities in DNR and LNR to rebuild them. So it probably means that some of the Russian cities will get a city on the territory of DNR and LNR to help them rebuild and support them in different ways. So we also see that Kherson is not mentioned. It's only DNR and LNR. And we also see that different officials of the Russian Federation are giving somewhat different signals about possible steps forward. Oh, they're maneuvering. I think they're not just maneuvering. They're also making statements to see the reaction of the West. Also, I want to pose a statement that the main focus of Kremlin's attention is not even on the battlefront. They're trying to sense West for a possibility of negotiation, some form of negotiation like Minsk III that we'll never agree to, that will take a snapshot of currently occupied territories, including Kherson and larger parts of DNR and LNR, and then bring it back up and say, well, let's fix the borders on these areas and be done with the war. But our president did come today with a rather bold statement who said that, victory in this war will cost us a lot of people and has already cost us from the Russians who killed thousands of Ukrainians. But we're looking not to negotiate our territories away, but to fight and win. At the same time, Nebenza, Russian representative in the United Nations, pushed a different statement. He was saying that Russia can supply some grain and some food to the world market, and the actual hunger probability started before Russian invasion, and it was more of a COVID and other reasons that triggered it. It is probably an answer to the Biden statement where he said that high gas prices and hunger, they're all on Russia. That is Russian fault. So in my mind, the food supplies are not that difficult. You can find more resources, you can find things. It's not so simple with liquid gas or oil. Food is easier in a way, but the problem is we did not fulfill our obligations to the suppliers internationally. they probably insured their supplies with some more supplies from other places, which made the prices a little higher, and they were capable to support only a portion of their buyers. So very likely there'll be, unfortunately, countries somewhere in Africa or down south that will not be able to afford certain products because of the prices that went up, and they will carry the brunt of that hit. And the rest, it actually is, it does have a global effect. All that food stuff, and what they're doing in the United Nations now, before the in-depth conversation about the food market, they're setting their field, and that's what Medvedevsky is doing, Russian representative there. He's putting ridiculous stakes out there to start with a ridiculous field and then maybe agree to somewhat reasonable and present it as the win. So Russia said they can also supply some grain, but that's the problem. Russia is under sanctions, so they're trying to be business as usual and avoid sanctions and, you know, make a buck selling stuff. I don't think that'll fly. So how difficult it is, because I don't think Ukraine will be able to supply its own products by sea. Well, it is a day of announcements. I'm looking through things that are falling on my cell phone. One of the American generals already stated that in regards to transporting grains and other food items from Ukraine to European Union, NATO members have freedom of selecting their modus of operations that might allow them to address that situation in a different manner. It could be linked to the talk of Milley with Gerasimov, but it might allow NATO members to export food items from Ukraine directly through the Black Sea. And it's a serious notion. Another one, Radar today put a statement out with a link to American sources that America is actually looking to give Ukraine some long-range anti-ship missiles, so that would push Russian ships way further out, away from the shore, and would clear. Because right now, Russia is using mines. They heavily mined certain parts of the sea, and these mines are now found everywhere, including the beaches of Odessa, even Moldova, and Turkey are getting some of them. And these countries are also feeling that limitation of trade, so they're ready to join and to jump on the bandwagon if somebody makes such a statement. So if NATO and West puts a question about deblocking Ukrainian cities along the shore and letting ships carry food cargo through the Black Sea, so they would need to also provide the sort of umbrella from the Russian warships and bombers and planes. And it appears that it may be the reason for their conversation that they are negotiating how to proceed around that. Because some cargo could be escorted with a NATO convoy. And I'm also showing our viewers that that's how you analyze the news and announcements that you see, just some basic political talk 101. Also, Russian bombers will not be able to go into the Black Sea, and some of the Russian storm fighters will also not be able to get there and shoot missiles, air-to-ground missiles into Ukraine. And Odessa will become way more safe than it is now. And of course, if it is NATO countries, we'll also get more intel and more support services, so we'll be in a stronger position on the Black Sea. And very probably that the mere fact of a complex operation that NATO can be or possibly would be doing in Ukraine, it might cool off some of the hotshots in Russia. That NATO is not afraid. NATO is going to go further. And they're not open to take Russia back into the European culture. At the moment, they might also come up with zones of safety in the Black Sea so that Russian troops would not attack anything within that zone. And this all is basically a change, a substantial change of the frame of this conflict. So you said, in the context of two recent subjects, about Kherson negotiations, and here in relation to a possible reaction of NATO countries with the Black Sea transport, and that bigger picture of possible food supply, food chain supply issues, and maybe hunger down south in Africa. Coming back to supplies of armaments, do you see that Lend-Lease that just got approved, 40 billion, could it get newer weapons included into it? Because at the podcast before you, we've been talking with some experts about maybe possible helicopters or jet fighters. Is there a possibility that NATO and, first of all, the United States will give some more of a unique equipment to the Ukrainian side? And may not be MiGs, even if some of the NATO countries do have them. It could have been newer vehicles. I was just reading the piece of news that Pentagon said they are not supplying long-range anti-ship missiles to Ukraine, but they're researching how can that be modified to be used from the shore, not from the floating platform. So one of the goals of this conflict is possibly, if you want to disarm Russia and basically cut Russian capability to wage war, you cannot do it just by infantry and by the army forces on the ground. You also need other angles. You need air, you need sea, and that could be part of that. And also, I want to notice that Americans usually do not make statements that they have not thought about. So if they are talking about possibility of more details and more armaments, that means new types like shore-to-ship missiles. There is a chance that they are considering it. And there was a statement in European Union both Germany and France are kind of in unison talking about Ukraine taking longer to join European Union, not NATO but EU, that no simplified procedure can be used, that at the same time they're also appealing to not humiliate Russia, not to push her in a corner, and create some space for dialogue. And there is a remote dialogue through media. So they're essentially pushing the point of view that Ukraine may have territorial issues or other issues joining the European Union. They need to be soft, slow, and cautious. And Yermak, our official from Ukraine, did follow that statement with his that Ukraine is not going to accept surrogate decision. This is not the reason for which thousands of our citizens are dying on the front. And we are not going to compromise our territory and peace for that. That construct is, maybe it's a phantom construct, it's just a test ball they roll. doesn't matter. This construct will not be
Поэтому
realized,
эта
not with
конструкция
our
или она вроде долго
participation.
предложена, или она
We're
реально
not going to
существующая,
participate
как
in that.
некоторая часть негласных договоренностей Украины принята не будет, а значит не будет реализована.
And
Не с нашей участием.
yeah, it's kind of bizarre. First, one thing they say you cannot join NATO, then they're saying, yeah, you can join EU, but the moment you go for EU, you can also not join NATO and not join EU. Yeah, I understand Russian concerns because that Lisbon EU's treaty also has an article. It's not Article 5 of NATO, but they do have an article that allows their countries to supply each other in case of war. But imagine, just give it a sec to look at how big of the forces are now participating in this problem. So China made a statement today about the BRICS. This is another defense union. That the BRICS countries have to aid international balance. At the same time, head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of United Kingdom is stating that NATO is strengthening and is also strengthening its ties not just with NATO members but with EU members. And new countries are joining. So it does mean that the war in Ukraine did basically launch the whole new wave of unions between countries in the world. And behind that, there is one very simple construct or fact that the old world order is no more. It's not working. And now different groups of countries are looking for a new order, new way to organize themselves. And that war here is as if a tornado that starts to rotate and grows bigger and bigger and bigger and sucks more and more countries into that. And they're basically trying to prevent a continental war in the 21st century with the threat of use of nuclear weapons. And in order to prevent that, old mechanisms are not enough, as we can see. So Potsdam, Washington, and other systems need to be reviewed and changed. And yeah, even if somebody mentioned also today that the war can expand and reach Moldova. At the same time, also, by the way, Britain sent us 1.5 billion and $15 billion support from J7. So it's a big story. We're getting a lot of different support items. We'll be tracking it, how it will go, and we'll return to all these subjects many times. I want to leave a note to our viewers in chat who are trying to push the subjects that we pushed aside, like Mariupol, that we're not discussing now. I want to appeal to them and say, let us wait. Whenever we can discuss that, we will get back to it. And the second question, and probably last one, about crossing the border in Ukraine and going to other countries. We discussed it several times with Olexiy and with Mikhail Podolyak and others. Situation did not change yet. When it does, we will know. So, over and over again, please do not repeat the same questions. If there is no new answer, there is no new answer. And we have 480,000 people watching us live. We've been live online for 39 minutes. Let's continue tomorrow. Friday is a good day for discussions. And we hope there'll be a bit more news tomorrow, so there'll be more news to comment about here, seems like. Don't forget to subscribe to Feygin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, to the Privateer Station if you're watching that in English, and click that like thing right under the video. That does help us to promote materials, as other Google vehicles are unavailable for any subject related to war, regardless of if you're supporting war or if you're against war. Alright, see you on Friday, Olexiy. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Thank you, Mark. Bye.